that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. One of her advocacy, crafting inclusive digital spaces for neurodivergent learners, no other than Miss Rebecca Prejean. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Rebecca. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. Super happy to be here. My name is Rebecca Prejean, and I am the CEO and founder of ED Graphics and Consulting. And we specialize in, as you said, accessible experiences for people in corporate. And so, what that really means is creating videos, animations, graphics, e learnings, training workshops, you name it, we do it essentially. But we just make sure that everybody can use it and businesses can actually, profit from that use. Um, and that really can be for anybody. It can be for folks with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. There's a lot of differences out there. And we just make sure that we try to address as much of that as possible so everybody can be successful at work.
Miss Rebecca, let's talk about the business case for accessibility, enhancing profitability through inclusive design. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world.
Super happy to be here.
What does accessibility mean in the context of business, and why is it critical factor for profitability?
What it means in the context of business, in a nutshell, is making sure that you have different ways to reach your employees. That's really all it is, and it's just that simplistic. And when we start thinking about why it's important in business, why it's important in corporate, I want folks to start thinking about training programs. That is a huge thing that everybody talks about. How are we going to train our employees? How do we make sure this training sticks? How do we make sure this training works? You do that by making sure everybody can actually use what you are providing them with. If you spend thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars in hours for manpower, creativity, all of these things to create training, and your employees can't digest it and apply it, then you've wasted all of that. And if you're not trying to reach multiple thought processes and thought pathways in your training, that's exactly what the result is going to be. People who will sit in front of a computer, they will maybe pass a test that you've given them at the end of their training, but they won't be able to really digest it and apply it. And if they can't do that, they can't support your business. And if your business isn't supported by your employees, there's no way that you can truly be profitable or as profitable as you should be at the end of the day.
Can you share a real world example of a company that boosted in profits through inclusive design?
While I have, of course, my people that are real world, I'll actually just kind of go out a little further and talk about Microsoft. Microsoft is a primary company, is a household name. If you haven't heard of Microsoft, you must be living under a rock, right? They are over everything. But the one thing that they have done, despite what some people may think, is they have actually really leaned into accessibility, really leaned into people with disabilities, neurodivergency, and all of these things. And they have only grown in the last 5 to 10 years because of that. They have specific programs that help to actually onboard their neurodivergent employees or people with disabilities. They have made that a core staple in their business. And so some of the growth that we have seen from them over the last few years can really be directly related to making sure that everybody who works for them can actually be successful. And like I said, that's an example of a household name that's doing that.
How does prioritizing accessibility in product or service design expand the business market reach, Ms. Rebecca?
When you decide that you're going to lean into this area, when you're going to address this area, your marketing, everything will increase because I want you to think, even from a marketing perspective, right? We've talked a lot about internal, I'll talk external for a minute. There is a huge share of the market that encompasses people with disabilities and with differences. Now, that could be blindness, that could be a bunch of different things, but there is a huge $1 billion market just of people who, have these things happening. And so if you're a company who decides to lean into this stuff, who leans into this not just internally but externally, you are chipping into a whole nother market, which then kind of expands where you can go as a business. You know, companies, even myself, people I know, we always talk about how can I reach more people? How can I expand my market share? How can I do these things? You do it by implementing common sense practices that can reach multiple people. That's how you actually go through and expand your market share.
Definitely. And what are the most compelling business benefits of adopting inclusive design practices, Ms. Rebecca?
Two, right off the bat, profitability, as we have said, as well as employee retention. And I'll give you a third, productivity. Because if your employees are able to be trained, digest it, apply it, they're going to want to stay because they're going to be able to do their jobs. They're going to feel better about doing their jobs. They're going to be able to be successful in their roles. They're not going to want to leave. Com- also, subsequently, they're going to be more productive because they're like, oh, I get it. This is how I do it. And I feel free enough in this space to maybe tweak the process a little bit so that it's more effective. So that also brings in innovation, which I didn't mention. And then, of course, all of these things make you more profitable because your people are able to produce more. They're able to sell more. They're able to retain more. It will grow your business. So, from a business standpoint, if you are at the point where you are wondering, how do I get my business to scale? How do I, kind of bring it to the next level? This is how you do it.
Ms. Rebecca, how can companies measure the financial impact of implementing accessibility in their operations?
And that's a very good question. And I do think that that scares people like, well, are you saying that I have to implement all of these big changes? Nobody is saying that to start. It's very simple things. Something as simple as an agenda for a meeting is something that is accessible. That is stepping into the accessibility bucket without doing anything, completely off the map. When you have an agenda for a meeting, because I mean, every business has a ton of meetings, if you send an agenda beforehand, maybe the day before, maybe a few hours before the meeting the day of, that allows your neurodivergent folks to be able to process, think through any questions that they may have, think through any kind of pointers that they can come up with for their specific role. And it actually makes them more comfortable, more confident, and it makes your meeting more effective because they're going to have various opinions, various thoughts that they can bring to the table. And that might change the trajectory of a few things. So, even something as simple as an agenda is something you can do, right? And that doesn't cost anything, that costs a few minutes of time. If we go into the spaces where, like e-learning design, yes, there are some things that will cost a bit more, but you don't have to do all of those things right away. Captions, transcripts, um, layout, when we're talking about e-learnings and slide decks and stuff like that, those are all parts of accessibility that, again, don't cost you anything for the most part or a very small amount. So, when it comes to talking about how to manage the cost, I always tell people start off small, start off simple. You don't have to do the entire 5 year plan right now. You can just start where you're at and start with something that is very simple, minimal cost, and then as time goes on and you're budgeting and you're seeing results and you're profiting more, then you can kind of come back in and say, how do we grow, our accessibility, program or base or strategy?
What role does inclusive design play in enhancing customer loyalty and brand reputation, Ms. Rebecca?
Plays a lot into it. The world that we live in right now is very different from the world that we lived in 5 years ago.
Yes.
5 years ago, people who might have been, dyslexic or had ADHD or autism or anything like that would not have probably even mentioned it. There's still a lot of people who don't, but you definitely have a shift where people are now talking about it, people are more aware of it, people outside of your company, outside of your brand are looking for people that see them. As consumers, we can say, well, I go to the store every day, I go to the store every day, but there's a reason that we tend to frequent the same places, the same brands, the same stores. We feel seen. And that can be in, oh, they know my style if it's a clothing designer, right? Oh, they know what I like. Like if it's a food place, they have the taste that I like. We feel seen. The same thing goes for this. If somebody sees that you are trying as a brand, don't have to get it all perfect, but if they see that you're trying, if they see that you are investing, if they see that you care, they feel seen. And by way of that, customers are like, I'm going to walk with you on this journey because I get the sense that even though you're corporate and nobody's perfect, you're at least thinking about people like me. And those are the brands that people are going to stay with, the ones that folks feel seen by.
Can you share a personal experience where accessibility improvements led to unexpected business gains?
I have a client, I have a few, but I actually have a university client. I've had them for a few years. And even though you might be thinking university, business, it's a little different. I want you to think enrollment. So they originally brought me on just to do a very small project. It was more of just like a booklet kind of pamphlet thing, not really thinking a lot about accessibility, if I'm being honest. But when people hire me, it's baked into what I do. Like there is no exception to it. And, it was a simple project, very minimal. I did the job, made a pamphlet, made a little kind of brochure thing, booklet, and went about my way. And probably about 2 or 3 months later, it's kind of that enrollment season. They were mentioning how many people had come to them about those deliverables and how many people were like, I saw what you had before and I wasn't really interested because it was just way too much going on. It was, I was overstimulated, what have you. But I was able to see your new deliverables and it told me all the information I needed in like a bulleted style. It was much more simplistic for me to digest. And therefore, they started to enroll. So they actually saw their enrollment go up as a result of this. And that's why I say a lot, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. Even the small stuff matters at the end of the day.
Ms. Rebecca, what are the common misconceptions business have about the cost or complexity of accessibility?
The cost and complexity, the misconceptions I see a lot is that you have to go all in right away or that you will not be forgiven if you make a mistake. A lot of the clients I talk to, a lot of the prospects that I interact with in the business world, some of them do want to lean into accessibility, but we also live in a world, I'm sure as you know, where social media is king, and people are scared sometimes. They're like, I don't know if I want to do this because what happens if I make a mistake? What happens if I don't use the right wording? What happens if I thought I did something right, but maybe I don't? Like, what does that look like? And so people get very concerned with this misconception of they won't be forgiven. There will always be somebody who you might not be able to make happy. Like you can't make everyone happy all times of every day. But
Yes.
most people, if they see you working towards it, if they see you trying, they will forgive a mistake here or there. Of course, it requires you to own up to a mistake once you make it, but they will go with you. In terms of the complexity, again, it really is this thought process of so now I've got to do color, I've got to do a new layout, I've got to do new branding when I might have paid thousands of dollars for branding. Like I've got to do a complete overhaul and I have to do it now. You don't have to do a complete overhaul, you don't have to do it now. The fact of the matter is, people in my space, myself included, we just want to see you start doing the work. It doesn't have to be the whole enchilada all at once. Like, I don't expect that. I'm like, why would we don't expect that of people who this is a new thing, right? It's like a child trying to walk. We don't expect the child to stand up one day and take off running. It would be amazing because, I mean, you have a savant at that point, but we don't expect that. Same thing with companies. Nobody expects you, most people at least, don't expect you to just wake up one day, say, you know what, we're going to go all in on accessibility, spend thousands of dollars, and you have to do it all right now. Rebrand your website, rebrand everything that you do, rebrand your sales process. That is an impossible ask.
Miss Rebecca, how can businesses leverage technology like AI to make the offerings more accessible?
AI is an interesting component when we start talking about accessibility because while it can give you some ideas of what you should have, it comes from a very specific lens and it's not always trained well. So what I do as an accessibility consultant, if I'm using AI, because I mean I use it, it's the way that we work today. I use it in terms of asking maybe ChatGPT to make like a block of text, maybe a little bit more simplistic. You just have to be very specific about how you ask it. Even when it comes to colors, you can ask it for a new color palette. You can ask it, how will these kind of line up? There's also websites that people can use that are, designed for this kind of thing. So you can leverage technology in a lot of ways to make sure that your color contrast is right and things aren't clashing. So people who might have color blindness can actually look at your website and understand what it is. Um, I do know some people will use ChatGPT or other AI systems to try to create alt text um, descriptions. I tell people a lot, be cautious of that because, again, AI is only as good as what it's trained on. And unfortunately, it's not necessarily trained on a lot of disability friendly things. It might know like your basic WCAG guidelines. And by all means, I do encourage people use it for that. Ask what are the
Yes.
current WCAG guidelines and make sure you specify the year because sometimes it doesn't go far enough back. But there are different ways to leverage technology to make sure that you have what you need.
Definitely. And Miss Rebecca, what are the biggest challenges business face when implementing accessibility and how can they overcome them?
I mean, the biggest challenge is really it's just getting started. um, getting started and getting out of the fear. But in business, we talk about fear all the time. It's scary to own a business. It is scary when you have employees that are depending on you. And, it's scary all around because you don't necessarily know what the market will look like in a few months. It is a scary thing to be a business owner. Like that's just the way life is to a certain extent. But just like we talk all the time about kind of feeding off the fear and just jumping over the hurdle, you have to do the same with this. You have to just be willing to go and try.
Miss Rebecca, as a digital space for neurodivergent learners as well as entrepreneur, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
For me, short term goals, I am actually starting up a couple of new ventures within my company. I'm launching a podcast in like less than a month that specializes and focuses on neurodivergent business owners and kind of their stories and their successes. So, kind of getting a different message out in a slightly different way is a short term goal. Long term goal is to, I'm like, take over the world, like Pinky and the Brain, focus on neurodivergency, but creating some different spaces, not only within corporate, but for younger people as well, um, to maybe pair with companies that are kind of more neurodivergent focused and kind of bridging some gaps between employment of people with disabilities and corporate because there's a huge disparity when it comes to to people with disabilities and employment. And like long term goal, I would like to shrink that, not just with what I do on a regular basis, but more of like a program and a partnership that can kind of bridge that gap. And to me, that is a key component in getting to the point where people understand this more, is letting them see actual faces and people and lives that this can in fact affect and impact.
Well, good luck to your goals, Miss Rebecca. Looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people that don't want to be like you?
Always remember that it's a long road. Like, and not every day will be easy. But also remember your why. Like for me, my why is my 9-year-old son. He's autistic, and our family went through so much to find him resources and to have him feel seen and appreciated. And that's a battle we still fight often, and sometimes it's almost every day. But he is my why. And if you can remember your why, even in those hard moments, you can still move forward.
Yes, remembering the why, people. And thank you for that advice, Miss Rebecca. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Um, in terms of influencing my journey, I am I am not necessarily a boundaries person. I'm not good at them. So, one book in particular is Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nidra Glover Tawwab. And then also, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. So I also like a book by Susan Cain called Quiet, the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking.
Thank you for that recommended book, Miss Rebecca. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and mental health 101 Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Rebecca, how can business ensure their accessibility efforts are authentic and not just a box checking exercise?
Bake it into your culture, bake it into your strategy. And if you have no idea where to start, hire a consultant. Like,
Yes.
not even, doesn't even have to be me. Like, find one that you're comfortable with and confident with. There's a lot of us out there. And let them at least start you on the journey if you're just not sure where to start.
So, what are the biggest challenges business face when implementing accessibility, and how can they overcome them?
I said biggest challenges are always going to be um, just getting started, really and truly. The biggest challenge is kind of creating a strategy around it, creating a plan around it, and not letting it overwhelm you at the end of the day. And in terms of like how to overcome it, you just have to start. It's like anything else. You really do have to either find somebody who you're comfortable with, or I mean, we live in the age of AI and technology, fine. Look for some things that are small wins, because sometimes some people need to see that it will work, like it's, a real possibility and it will benefit them. Start doing something small. I recommend, if you have nowhere else to start, in your videos, add captions and transcripts. And on a daily basis, for all you meeting people, add an agenda and just see how much better your meetings are, how much more effective they are, and just how much more targeted they are.
Miss Rebecca, how can accessibility enhance companies' ability to attract and retain diverse talent?
It keeps them from leaving. If I am an employee and I am sitting in an office with all of my peers and I don't feel seen, you are doing stuff off the cuff, as a lot of companies do, but you give no thought to how it could impact people, how to deliver this message so people can process it, plan, and actually execute what you're asking, your people will leave. Not just because they don't feel seen in some cases, but also because they're frustrated. They're like, I want to do a good job. Nobody wants to go to work and do a bad job. That's typically not how that works in the human psyche. And so if they can't do a good job, not because they're not capable, but because they don't feel like they're given the tools, they ask for the tools and they're still not given, then they're going to move on. And these are the minds you don't want to move on. You want to keep them. They're the creativity, they are the innovation.
Miss Rebecca, for my last question for listeners or and viewers on book 101 review, what's one actionable step a business owner can take to start incorporating inclusive design for greater profitability?
What's one step? Um, Educate yourself a little bit. Like out of all the things that I can tell you, all the things that I've done said so far, I would say do a little bit of educating. And it doesn't mean go out and read like all of the WCAG guidelines. Not necessarily what I'm saying. Look up the stories of people who are neurodivergent or who have disabilities. Find actual advocates who might own their own businesses, be lawyers, be doctors, all of these things, and look at their journeys and start to wonder how many of your employees have had that same type of journey and are struggling in your business. Sometimes I think when you educate yourself and you become more aware, it makes you more prone to go out and do things.
Miss Rebecca, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Sure. So, yes, everybody can visit me at www.ebgc.net. That is my company's website. They can also look me up on LinkedIn, Rebecca Prejean. And like I said, stay tuned. In about a month, I'll do an announcement on my LinkedIn, but the Coach Factory podcast will be debuting.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Rebecca Prejean because if you support her, for sure, more and more and more empowering business to come. More and more empowering, well, podcast to come. So, Miss Rebecca, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.